Hey, Marcus Hutzel here, and in this video I just kind of wanted to take you on a little journey into a different aspect of my home and YouTube studio here. You may have seen some of my videos describing how I made that actual wood shiplap wall back there, but before I actually made that, I was looking for a simpler solution to have kind of this nice wood back wall, and I thought, well, why don't I get like a soft good, like a fake or faux wooden back wall, and use that as my backdrop. My only problem was, where do I actually put it, because this is a small room and I really didn't have a lot of space to constantly be putting up a backdrop and then taking it down, etc., etc. So I went ahead and bought one anyway. I bought this a couple of years ago, and I got it off of that ubiquitous online retailer that we like so much. And it's a really nice one in terms of quality. It feels really good. It's heavy. It's not real thin. I believe it's a Cape backdrop. I will put the link in the description. And it was about $125 because I needed a large one. I needed one that I could sit far away from to give some depth of field and that would fill the camera frame. So this is about, I think it's a 10 by 12, 10 feet wide. It's quite large, and it was worth it, except for the fact that when I got it in the mail, I was a little disappointed with the color rendition to the eye, because even though it looks pretty good on camera when we're done with it, if you don't set up your camera and your lighting correctly, then it's not going to look great. It's going to look a little bit fake, and I didn't want that. I wanted this to fool you into thinking I actually had a nice wooden backdrop. And here in this current lighting in my studio, it may look fine. Of course, it's wadded up on my hands, but I'm gonna take you with me to where I usually use this, which is my garage. So follow me for a sec. We'll go down here to the garage, and it's a little messy, but hey, it's a garage. Now in here, if we kind of dump this out on the table, to my eyes, it's kind of flat. It's kind of bland. That's kind of what it looks like in quote unquote natural light. Now these lights are about 4,000 Kelvin, somewhere in there. So it's not a completely warm light and it's not a daylight light. But in this light, as I edit this video and show it to you here on YouTube, this is kind of what it looks like to the eye. It's not great, and I was a little worried that it wasn't going to work. However, if we just set up our cameras and our lighting and set certain settings the way we should, this is actually meant to fool you, and we can actually do this with it. Not bad, huh? It's amazing what you can do with a little bit of lighting and a little bit of camera trickery to fool you into thinking that's a real wooden wall. Now, let's go back to the other view and I'll show you how I did this. How about that? So now I'm going to show you how we take this somewhat bland, good quality, but somewhat bland colored backdrop and make it look luxurious. All right, let's go. And real quick to walk you through the stand setup, it's fairly simple. I'm not going to set it up on camera. We've got one stand here with the sandbag on the bottom. It comes up, we get the 10-foot span across the top, that black bar right there. It comes down to the other stand and it sits right there and covers up my workbench area. So we've got this nice big area to put that backdrop. I will kind of sit at the other workbench out here, but it gives me space to be able to sit far enough out in front of it to give me a little bit of depth of field behind it, which is why I opted to go for at least a 10-foot wide backdrop, and you'll see why in just a sec. Now the backdrop hardware, the stand itself comes with a bunch of these clips, but I actually don't really like these very well. I don't think they grip the backdrop tight enough on the pole, so I went to my favorite hardware store and I bought a bunch of these. They're much stronger and they provide a much tighter hold on there. So yeah, a bunch of those. They're about $1 a piece. I find that it's a little saggy at the top, so I usually just put a clip or two at the top to kind of tighten it up there, because with a 10-foot wide span, that cheap bar does kind of sag, but that's okay. We have tools at our disposal. And as long as it looks good to camera, that one eventually, it'll be just fine. All right, so obviously that part doesn't take very long. Setting up the backdrop stands, putting the backdrop on and tightening it up doesn't take very long. It takes a little longer to actually frame it up properly with where I want to sit and how far away I want to be from it. And I'll show you how I do that. All right, so to further sell this backdrop to you, the viewer, as a real wooden backdrop, we need to do a couple of things. Obviously, number one, we need to frame it up properly, which is gonna come from that angle that we'll move here in a second. We need to frame it up so that that is filling the video frame. And number two, I really wanna keep myself as far away from that backdrop as possible with still having everything in frame, including myself. And I wanna stay far away from that, or at least as far away as possible, because that will give me more depth of field. It will put that background a little bit more out of focus the further away I am from it. Because obviously, if I'm here and the camera is focused on me, it will be less in focus in the back. And since I'm using primarily a Panasonic GH5 to do this with a 1.4 aperture lens, that's about the widest aperture I can get for that camera, but I like using that camera in this space. So we'll frame it up, we'll put me where I need to be, and we'll see how out of focus we can get that in addition to changing a lighting. So currently we have the Panasonic 12mm 1.4 on here. And the problem with this lens, even though it's a 1.4, is that from this angle, you can see that I'm gonna have to push in pretty far to be able to fill this frame. And because of that, if that's where I need the camera, for me to fill the frame, I've got to be right here, and sometimes I want to show more stuff on the table. So this puts me only about 2, not even 3 feet away from this backdrop, which means it's going to be more in focus. So we're going to have to use a different lens, and we're going to use the Sigma 16mm 1.4, which will give us the equivalent field of view of roughly a 33mm on that camera. Let me change it. Hold on. All right, so Sigma 16mm, obviously tighter field of view, but that means we can now push that camera further back, and therefore I can be further away from the backdrop. So let's do that. Pull this guy back. So you can see how far we were able to move back with a tighter lens. Gets me further away from the wall, but still allows the lens to fill the frame with the backdrop. All right, that's not bad. Now I can scoop my bench where I want it, and I usually sit for these style videos. So I can sit, I can get fairly close to the camera. And now, let's see how far away I am from that wall. That puts my face about 5 feet from that wall. So as long as my face is in focus, that wall will be less in focus, or at least as less in focus as I can get with the Panasonic GH5 and an f1.4 lens. But I'm generally happy with that, other than the fact that it still doesn't look very good because we haven't lit it. That's the next step. So obviously we're not going to use these ugly garage lights, so we need to turn them off, but I don't want to leave you in the dark, so I'm going to leave them on for just a minute while I set up my main key light and my auxiliary lights to get to the final product. So to do that, what I use, batteries Aziz, this little Godox ML60 Bi. This thing is great. It's small, it's obviously lightweight, and it is powerable by either AC power or batteries. So if I know I'm gonna film something kind of, for an hour or two in here, I'll put this thing on plug-in power. But if I'm just doing a quick video, then I can run this light for a couple of hours on a couple of these Sony batteries. So we'll attach our little softbox, attach the little battery cable that comes with it. And there you go. Now I've got a portable light. Pardon. And we'll just use an inexpensive light stand to put this on. I like my light on my left side. I don't know why, it just looks better to me over here. All right, so we've got our key light. I'll start turning off these other lights. That looks terrible, but the reason it looks terrible right now is because we haven't set our lighting color and white balance our camera to that same thing. So because this backdrop, hang on. Because this backdrop, I wouldn't call it warm, I wouldn't call it cool, I'd call it kind of something in between, but we need to warm it up. Well, I want it to look a little darker, a little more orange in the final product. So you might think, well, then we need to set our key light to a warm color, but that's actually the opposite of what we need to do. If we set our key light to a warm color, then we'll have to tell our cameras, that one being a little overexposed right now, we'll have to tell our cameras that we have it set to a warm color, therefore the video frame that you see coming out of camera will have to cool down the entire image. Let's see what that looks like. We'll set our key light to 3200. Then we'll turn off our main lights. And even though the wall looks nice and warm, when I enter the frame, I look a little warm as well. And if we were to white balance this video clip in post, then the wall becomes less warm. It's not really the look I'm going for. Why? Well, because if our light is at 3200 Kelvin, which it is now, we have to tell our camera that that's our white point, 3200 Kelvin. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to balance my skin to make my skin and everything look natural. So we've warmed up the video frame, but the camera needs to cool down the video frame because the light is so warm. So it's cooling down everything, which includes my face as well as the backdrop. So how do we solve this? Well, let's set our light to 5600 Kelvin. All right, that's a lot better, except for it's not because I haven't set the white balance on my camera again. Let me do that real quick. I'm gonna set my camera to 5600 Kelvin. All right, so that's actually looking pretty good at this point. So what have we done here? How do we make this look better with only changing the light? Well, again, if we have a cool light, it cools down the information in the light coming into camera. We have to tell our camera, hey, we've got cool light. We have a 5600 Kelvin light. The camera says, okay, it's cool light. We need to warm up the entire image. So it warms up everything you see, including my face, to make me look more natural. At the same time, it warms up the background because it's in the video frame. So it brings up the warmth of that background and we're left with, I don't know, pretty decent looking image here. But I'm not quite done because this was a really quick setup. I just threw the light up and turned it on. I didn't really aim it specifically, and we can do a little bit better. I can actually sell this illusion a little more, and we're gonna do that. First of all, with the addition of a grid over the front of my softbox so that that light spill isn't so wide. So let's put this grid on. All right, so you can see that adding the grid does one thing that I wanted it to do, and it keeps the light from spilling all over that backdrop, further hopefully selling the illusion that that's a real wooden backdrop back there. But I think it makes it a little too much of a moody look. This side of my face is almost completely in shadow, and unless I had something like really dramatic and important to say, it may not be right for what I need to do. And a lot of the time what I'm doing in here is I'm kind of talking about things on my workbench, be it my backpack reviews or some audio gear or video gear or something. So I need more light because I just need more light. So I usually do that with a couple of these pocket lights. I've got a bowling P1 and I have this Andesini R1. So I usually take one and I put it kind of back over my right shoulder to light up this side of my face, give me a little backlight. So let's go set this up back there. I normally just take a cheap articulating arm and I will mount that just on the actual upright of the backdrop frame itself and put this little pocket light on it. All right, so we've got our shoulder light, as you can see, giving me some side face light, a little bit of shoulder light. The problem is, as you can see, it's also spilling onto the backdrop. Again, I don't want a lot of that. So we're gonna take some of these little honeycomb grids. This actually came as an additional package that you can buy for the bowling P1. This is the little bowling lighting grid and barn door package. And it comes with several of these grids, it comes with some barn doors, So I'm going to use one of these to put on that light so that it doesn't spill in the background, but it still hits me. Let's give it a shot. Not bad, not bad. I think we need a little more key light. Somewhere in that neighborhood. And a little more rear light. All right. I think our video frame is looking pretty good now. It's still a bit dramatic. Again, we can play with the lights, but in general, I've achieved the look I'm going for. I've got a wooden backdrop in the back that at this point, I don't think you could tell whether it's fake or real. You should be focused on what I'm doing, whether it's talking about this light or this godox remote or my 10-year-old iPad mini. That's what you should be focusing on. So if you're focused on the background, I haven't done my job unless it's this video where I'm actually talking about that background. And I'll use the bowling P1 a lot of the times to mount up over on the side of my table, usually not with blue, to help light up the table itself in case I'm talking about a product. Again, I'll use another little grid to just light up the table itself to show what it is I'm talking about. You know what? We'll set that. We'll put this other grid on here, and then when I actually mount this light up here, it can be another light source that doesn't light me up, but lights the table. That's for another time. So if you see light on the table from those top-down shots occasionally, it's coming from either my key light or this little bowling P1 battery-operated light that is lighting up just the products and not me. So, I don't know, you tell me. Have I done a good job of selling this $125 soft backdrop as a wood wall? I think it looks great. If you watch any of my videos, you've seen it at least 3 or 4 times in this space, knowing that I'm actually in my garage, my very, very hot garage in the South Texas heat in, what is this, late August, early September? Hopefully the sweat doesn't show up on camera. I can't do anything about that, and I can't do anything about the locusts that are about to start their locust calls. I think I hear a bird out there right now. Yeah, that's the problem with filming in your garage. Anyway, I really hope at least some of this was educational, helpful to you, and showed you a little bit behind the scenes of the movie magic that we try to create here on YouTube and, you know, in our daily lives to entertain ourselves. See ya. Later.